You know, I'm quite of a nostalgic kid myself, seeing that I entertain my inner child by collecting a lot of tiny metal cars. Speaking of Hot Wheels and Mattel, I know I gave them a lot of shit because maybe it's just the current state of Hot Wheels that I'm not really enjoying. But let's get to the positive side of things and reminisce our invaluable memories of our childhood. Now, if you were to imagine what decade represents the golden era of Hot Wheels, for me, well, I think everyone can have their own opinion. It's not the 1970s, it's not the 80s, it's not the 90s, unfortunately, although 90s come a close second. It's not the 2020s or the 2010s, it's the 2000s. I have to admit, by the time of the 2000s, I was still a little kid, devoid of knowing how to take care of little toy cars, because like I love to crash them and all. However, as I grow older, I always remind myself of how precious these antiques are. As also the fact that I'm also biased about this, but anyway. And the fact that the mainline cars back in the 2000s were produced with amazing care says a lot about how cherished those times were. Now, to further prove my point, this is why the 2000s were actually really, really special. Now, the innovation of new things and attention to detail in designing these cars were absolutely majestical at its time. And of course, the key word of the 2000s was innovation. And they weren't afraid to try something out. Like for example, if you were to look at MSC Suzuka, Super Tsunami, Super Tune, or Sear Tuner, what do they all have in common? They were inspired by the tuner culture of the 2000s. Now, this is one thing that you have to know. Most of these designs, or some certain designs as a matter of fact, revolve around a certain theme related to a segment of a car culture that it wants to represent. Whether if you want it to become a muscle car, or a tuner, or exotic sports car, even before the JDM hype was, at its peak in like late 2010s. Even the liveries of those cars were strikingly beautiful and quite unhinged or, also memorable as well, to the point where it matches its theme and aesthetic to it. Now, I have to admit, while some cars they design may look wacky, for example, the torpedoes, the drop tops, the fatbacks, and blings, there's just sort of unexplainable charm that makes it feel special and unique as it stands out from other castings. It looks cartoonish of course, but you know what? Why the fuck not? Most paint decos were dealt with correctly as they match the themes of which car belongs to which. It aged like fine wine till this very day due to how well managed and finely crafted even to the point where they actually had extreme attention to detail. Not just like, oh yeah, we're just gonna have a, realistic livery, I just like slap some logos. Maybe I get it, they don't have that much licensing, but I mean, come on. The 2000s were built different. So, for example, the F1 car that has been used as a template for the 2000s generations of F1 cars and most Hall of Fame cars. Now, in continuation to the innovations that they made, they also had a marketing strategy which is actually quite genius. Even though they used a lot of tampon for their production to this very day, they had this water slide decals as part of like their innovation and all that kind of stuff, which is actually more durable compared to your usual tampo on those kind of cars as used in the Highway 35, where they actually use these extreme fusion graphics for their cars to be durable and all that kind of stuff. They also did this anodization of plastic to make it actually feel like as if it were metal. And trust me, back when I was 15 or 16 years old, when I actually bought my first accelerators, I thought that was actually metal, but no, it was actually plastic. And now you see, this is kind of like the genius that they pulled off, so that's that. And the invention of cobalted wheels basically sold me on that part. Now, even though they have the metal chassis and plastic body for the on-track action or whatever, the cobalt wheels, they add that tiny charm to it. Well, not tiny charm, but a huge charm for most of this generation that they'd enjoy. Mostly the accelerations cars, but they also did it on some mainline cars and even the Highway 35 ones as well. Although the variation is basically 5-spoke and accelerations variation was the 6-spoke. So it's basically a use of two different colored plastics molded into one wheel. They still kick ass to this very day and it's mostly regarded as one of, if not the best wheel types that Hot Wheels has invented to this very day. And even it is used in the speed machines line, but yeah, they had to do a limited budget cut, whatever. I almost forgot to add that most of the playsets that the 2000s had were actually incredibly brilliant. Now it kind of spawned off the success from Hot Wheels City back in the day, but then, they evolved into like those booster tracks with like incredulous loops, crisscross crashes, or I don't know, anything you can imagine playing with your Hot Wheels, as if you can like imagine they're just zooming by with those boosters right there. That used to be the peak of childhood fun when you're playing with Hot Wheels. I had experienced that when I was a kid, although unfortunately I do not own any racetracks that have these sort of boosters in it. Although my cousin used to own one, it's just right now it's not in my control. I wish I would own one someday. It's just the recent ones have been a little bit lackluster. Although I have to admit, I'm going a little bit off topic, but the Matchbox action drivers are actually killing it, so moving on. At a time where car culture, car media, franchises, and motorsports were at its peak, popularity, for example, F1, Gran Turismo, Need for Speed, Pixar's Cars, Fast and Furious, Hot Wheels also pumped out a lot of games for the consoles and a few moves to join the car media bandwagon. Notable ones that came out from that era were Velocity X, Stunt Track Challenge, Highway 35, and the video game itself, Accelerators, and beat that. Even the Hot Wheels Flash games that they used to have in the websites back in the late 2000s were really fun and enjoyable. Those were the days that most old Hot Wheels fans and old generation kids like me used to love and cherish, to the point where there's this collective fandom of a certain movie or a video game that basically brings us together. For example, the Highway 35 and the Acceleration Saga, or even the Velocity X, even Battle Force 5. No joke, those were one of, if not the best times that we could all reminisce in our childhoods. Unfortunately, as the mid-2000s came to a close, everything that we all know and love started to fade away. Although the cancellation of Acceleration was kind of like the indirect precursor of the downfall, there were actually some good things to happen in the late 2000s. For example, the Speed Racer line that was licensed by Hot Wheels to basically kind of create these toy cars, although if I'm being completely honest, they weren't actually enough. We need more of those. Battle Force 5, the Ferrari racers that had the co-molded 6-spoke wheels, and the Speed Machines line. Who could ever forget about that? Although I never bought any, which is quite unfortunate. They're actually still part of the staple of Hot Wheels creativity. In other words, those 4 lines back in the late 2000s kept Hot Wheels creativity together until late 2013. Now, this is the point where mostly the corporate mindset took over, to the point where it just became a scenario of quantity over quality. Moreover, as we live in the 2020s, we are living in the times where mediocrity seems to be the new norm, and standards have been lowered to the point where it's just more of a cash cow than worth the effort. From a business perspective, I understand that production needs to be more effective due to the high demands and the market share, but for such a majestic and, quite frankly, a golden time to be a car fan or just enthusiast in general, to now being confined to the dark ages where minimalism and corporate hacks are the new norms. Basically, they've gotten so comfortable to the way that they've done their things, to the point where they just don't want to innovate anymore. It's just basically copy-paste, same old things again. Now it just doesn't resonate with anyone, or even me, despite the few bright spots sprinkled here and there. But yeah, who knows? Maybe, just maybe, we might be in for much better and brighter days. That's it for me, and hope you enjoyed this video of why the 2000s was so special in Hot Wheels history. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Adios.